Daniel Cross thought joining the Freemasons would honor his father's memory. Instead, they blindfolded him, handed him a cup, and told him to drink. He trusted them, he shouldn't have. What they made him swallow that night haunted him for months. The taste never left. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came after, when his boss stopped giving him clients. When his landlord refused to renew his lease, when every door in the city closed in his face. They were all Freemasons, and they were all watching. Within a year, Daniel had lost everything, his job, his home, his future, all because he walked away from their ritual. 3 years later, Daniel came back, different name, different face, different man. He sent them invitations, handwritten, elegant, impossible to refuse. And when they arrived, he made them sit in a circle. He placed the same cup in their hands, and he asked them one simple question: "Do you trust me?" But before you find out what happened next, let me ask you something. Would you forgive the men who destroyed your life, or make them feel exactly what you felt? Daniel Cross stood outside the lodge for 20 minutes before going in. His father had been a member for 30 years. Now his father was gone. And Daniel thought this would bring him closer. He thought wrong. The building looked normal from the outside. Brick, clean, professional. A brass plaque by the door read, "Founded 1887. His father's name was engraved on a memorial stone near the entrance. Daniel traced the letters with his finger. He wanted to feel something, connection, pride, anything. Instead, he felt cold. He'd received the invitation 2 weeks after the funeral, handwritten, elegant paper. "Your father was a valued brother. We would be honored to continue his legacy through you." It was signed by Gerald Whitmore, worshipful master. Daniel had never heard his father talk about the lodge, not once, but he found membership documents in his father's desk, dues paid every year, attendance records going back decades. His father had kept this part of his life separate, private. Daniel wanted to know why. Inside, the room smelled like old wood and candle wax. The men were older, respectable bankers, lawyers, business owners. They wore dark suits, polished shoes, wedding rings. Daniel recognized some of them from around town. They smiled when he entered, but their eyes didn't. "Welcome, Brother Cross," the worshipful master said. His voice was calm, too calm. Daniel recognized him, Gerald Whitmore. He'd spoken at his father's funeral. He'd called his father a man of honor. He'd gripped Daniel's shoulder and said, "He was one of us." At the time, Daniel thought it was just a phrase. Now he understood. His father had been part of something these men valued, something Daniel didn't understand yet. Gerald stood at the head of the room, hands folded, watching. The other men formed a loose semicircle behind him. Daniel counted 9 of them, all watching, all silent. "We're glad you accepted our invitation," Gerald said. "Your father spoke of you often. He wanted this for you." Daniel nodded. He tried to match their composure. His throat was dry. They led him to a side room, small, no windows, a single chair and a wooden bench. "You'll need to change," someone said. They handed him a white robe. No pockets, no phone, nothing. The fabric felt cheap, thin, like a hospital gown. Daniel hesitated. "It's tradition," the man said. "Everyone goes through it." Daniel undressed and put on the robe. It hung loose on his frame. He felt exposed, vulnerable. When he came back out, the candles had been dimmed. The men stood in a circle, silent, watching. Their faces were shadows now. "Step forward," the master said. Daniel obeyed. His bare feet touched cold stone. They blindfolded him. The cloth smelled like mothballs and sweat. His heartbeat quickened. He could hear them breathing, moving around him, circling. "Do you trust us, Brother Cross?" Gerald asked. "Yes," Daniel said. He didn't know why he said it. Maybe because his father had. Maybe because he wanted it to be true. Maybe because saying no felt like betraying his father's memory. Do you trust that we have your best interests at heart? Yes. Do you trust that what we do here is for your benefit? Yes. Each question felt heavier than the last. They guided him to the center of the room. Someone placed a cup in his hand. Heavy, metal, warm. Not warm from heat, warm from hands. Many hands. Drink, the master commanded. Daniel held the cup. He could feel liquid inside, moving, thick. What is it? He asked. Silence. Then laughter, quiet, mocking, like a joke he wasn't in on. Drink or leave, Gerald said. His voice had changed. Harder now, colder. Daniel stood there, blindfolded, holding the cup. He thought about his father. Had his father done this? Had he stood here, in this same spot, holding this same cup? The whisper he'd heard on his way out echoed in his mind before it even happened. His father did the same thing. Daniel hesitated. But he had come this far. He had buried his father 3 months ago. He had nowhere else to go, no other connection to the man who raised him. He lifted the cup. The liquid was thick, bitter, wrong. It coated his throat. He gagged, but swallowed. The taste was unlike anything he'd experienced, metallic, rotten, like something that had been sitting in the heat for days. More laughter, louder this time. It filled the room. Daniel's stomach turned. He tried not to vomit. He tried to breathe. When they removed the blindfold, Daniel saw their faces. Not brothers, predators. They were grinning, all of them. Some had their phones out, recording. The light from the screens lit their faces from below. Gerald stood closest. His smile was wide, satisfied. "You drank well," he said. "Better than most." Daniel's vision blurred. "What was that?" he managed to ask. "Does it matter?" Gerald said. "You already swallowed." The room tilted. Daniel stumbled toward the door. No one stopped him. No one followed. No one offered help. As he pushed through the door, he heard one of them whisper, "His father did the same thing." The words hit him like a punch. His father had done this, had endured this. Why had he come back? Why had he stayed? Daniel never returned. But the ritual never left him. He could still taste it every morning, every night. He scrubbed his mouth until his gums bled. It didn't help. The bitterness stayed. And so did the shame. He had done exactly what they wanted. He had trusted them, and they had laughed. Daniel didn't know it yet, but that night wasn't the end. It was the beginning of his fall. And years later, the beginning of theirs. Daniel tried to forget. He went back to work, back to his routine, back to pretending that night never happened. But the men from the lodge were everywhere. One of them was his boss. Another sat on the board of his bank. A third ran the building where he rented his apartment. Daniel hadn't noticed before. Now he couldn't stop noticing. At first, nothing changed. He went to the office. He did his work. He met with clients. He smiled and shook hands and pretended everything was fine, but the taste never left his mouth. He brushed his teeth 4 times a day. He chewed gum until his jaw ached. Nothing worked. The bitterness stayed, and every time he saw one of them, the taste got stronger. His boss was Richard Kellerman. He'd been at the lodge that night. He'd been one of the ones laughing. Now he sat across from Daniel in meetings, smiling like nothing had happened, like they shared a secret. Daniel tried to ignore it. He tried to focus on his work, but Richard's smile never reached his eyes. It was the same smile from that night. Cold. Knowing. Then the calls stopped coming. Clients he'd worked with for years went silent. Emails went unanswered. Meetings got cancelled. Daniel asked Richard about it. "Just a slow season," Richard said. "Don't worry about it." But Daniel did worry, because the clients weren't going to competitors. They were staying with the firm. They were just being reassigned to other account managers, to anyone but Daniel. His biggest client was Thompson Industries. He'd managed their account for 3 years, built a relationship with the CEO, delivered results every quarter. Then one morning, Richard called him into his office. "Thompson's requested a change," he said. "They want someone with more experience." Daniel stared at him. "I've been with them for 3 years." Richard shrugged. "Their decision, not mine." But Daniel had seen Gerald Whitmore having lunch with Thompson's CEO the week before. Within 3 months, Daniel lost 4 major accounts. His commission dropped by 60%. He started working longer hours, trying to bring in new business. Cold calling, networking events, anything to make up the difference. But every door seemed to close before he could get through it. Every promising lead went cold. It was like someone had put a mark on him, invisible. But everyone could see it. His performance review came in January. Richard sat across from him with a folder. "You're not meeting expectations," he said. Daniel looked at the numbers. They were accurate. He couldn't argue with them. "I lost my biggest accounts," Daniel said, "through no fault of my own." Richard leaned back in his chair. "In this business, results matter, not excuses." He slid a document across the desk. "We're putting you on probation, 60 days to improve." Daniel knew what that meant. Probation was the first step, the paperwork they needed before letting someone go. He looked at Richard, the same cold smile. "Is this because of the lodge?" Daniel asked. The words came out before he could stop them. Richard's expression didn't change. "I don't know what you're talking about." But his eyes said otherwise. Daniel tried. He worked 12-hour days, came in on weekends, but every opportunity slipped through his fingers. Clients who seemed interested suddenly weren't. Deals that were almost closed fell apart. It was surgical, precise. Someone was making sure he failed. After 60 days, Richard called him back into the office. "We're letting you go," he said, "effective immediately." Daniel didn't argue. He packed his desk in silence. Security walked him out. He never saw Richard smile. The man just watched him leave. His landlord refused to renew his lease. Daniel had lived in the apartment for 5 years, never missed a payment, never caused problems. But when the lease came up for renewal, the landlord sent a letter. "We've decided to go in a different direction." The landlord's name was Marcus Webb. He'd been at the lodge that night too. Daniel recognized his signature. He'd seen it on the membership roster in his father's papers. Daniel moved into a cheaper place across town. Smaller, darker. The neighborhood was louder, the walls were thin, but it was all he could afford now. His savings drained faster than he expected. Unemployment barely covered rent. He applied for jobs, dozens of them. He had experience, good references, or so he thought, but the interviews never went anywhere. "We'll be in touch," they'd say. They never were. One interviewer asked him why he'd left his last position. Daniel gave the standard answer, "Looking for new opportunities." The interviewer nodded, then asked, "Do you know Richard Kellerman?" Daniel's stomach dropped. "He was my former boss." The interviewer made a note. Daniel didn't get the job. He started to understand. They were calling Richard, and Richard was making sure Daniel stayed unemployed. His phone stopped ringing. Friends stopped inviting him out. People he'd known for years suddenly had excuses. They were busy. They had plans. Maybe next time. But next time never came. Daniel realized his social circle had overlapped with the lodge more than he'd known. These men had connections, influence, and they were using it, not loudly, not publicly, just enough. Just enough to make sure Daniel understood. "You embarrassed us by leaving. Now we'll make sure you have nowhere to go." Daniel started drinking. Not socially, alone, in his apartment, with the lights off. He'd wake up at 3 in the morning with the taste of that cup still in his mouth. The bitterness wouldn't leave. It had been 8 months since that night. 8 months, and he could still taste it, still feel the weight of the cup in his hand, still hear them laughing. One night, he stood on his balcony and looked down. 6 stories. It would be fast. The thought came easily, too easily. He stood there for an hour, The city lights blurred through his tears. He thought about his father. Had his father felt this way? Had the lodge broken him too? Or had his father been strong enough to endure it? Daniel didn't feel strong. He felt hollowed out, empty. He didn't jump. Not that night. But he thought about it. More than once. More than he wanted to admit. The men from the lodge had taken everything. His career, his home, his reputation, his future. And they'd done it quietly. Systematically. No one would believe him if he tried to explain. It would sound paranoid. Crazy. But Daniel knew. He knew exactly what they'd done, and why. They'd made him drink, they'd laughed, and when he'd left, instead of staying, instead of playing along, they'd decided to punish him, to make an example of him, to show what happens when you disrespect the brotherhood. Daniel sat on his couch in the dark, unemployed, alone, broken, and for the first time since that night, he felt something other than shame. He felt anger, cold, focused, growing. They'd taken everything from him. Now he was going to take something back. Daniel disappeared for 3 years. He left the city without telling anyone. No forwarding address, no social media updates, no trace. He wanted to vanish, and he did. He moved to a small town 2 states away, found work under the table, construction, landscaping, jobs where no one asked questions, jobs where his past didn't matter. He lived in a trailer on the edge of town. No neighbors, no visitors, just him and the silence. The first year was the hardest. He'd wake up angry, go to sleep angry. The taste was still there, the bitterness, the shame, but slowly something changed. The anger stopped consuming him. It started focusing, sharpening, becoming something else, something useful. He started researching, late at night, on a laptop he bought at a pawn shop. He learned everything he could about the lodge, about Freemasonry, about the rituals, not the public information, not the Wikipedia version, the real things, the things they didn't talk about. He found forums, anonymous accounts, former members who'd left and wanted to talk, people who'd been hurt, people like him. He learned about the hierarchy, the degrees, the ceremonies, the symbols they used and what they actually meant. He learned that what happened to him wasn't official. It wasn't part of any real Masonic ritual. It was hazing, cruelty dressed up as tradition, something those specific men had created, something they'd probably done to others, maybe even to his father. Daniel found his father's journals in a storage unit. His mother had packed them away after the funeral. Daniel had avoided them before. Now he read every page. His father had joined the lodge at 25. The entries started hopeful, proud. But over the years, the tone changed. The writing became darker, more resigned. His father never explicitly described what happened, but Daniel could read between the lines. The shame, the silence, the way his father kept going back year after year, like he had no choice. One entry stood out, written 2 months before his father died. They own you once you drink, not legally, not physically, but they own you because you can never prove what they did, and they'll never let you forget. Daniel read it 3 times. His father had known. Had lived with it for 30 years, had never escaped. Daniel closed the journal. He wasn't going to live like that. He wasn't going to let them own him. He started planning. Not revenge, not in the traditional sense. He didn't want to hurt them, not physically. He wanted them to feel what he felt, to understand what they'd done, to experience the same humiliation, the same powerlessness. He wanted to reverse it. To make them drink from the same cup, literally and metaphorically. Daniel changed his appearance, grew a beard, cut his hair short, started wearing glasses he didn't need. He gained weight, muscle, from the physical work, from the hours he spent in a small gym. He didn't look like the man who'd left the city 3 years ago. He looked harder, older, unrecognizable. He changed his name, legally, David Crossan, close enough to remember. Different enough to hide. He built a new identity, new credentials, new history. He found people who could help with that. For a price. It wasn't cheap. But Daniel had been saving. Every dollar from every job. Living on nothing. Preparing for this. He moved back to the city in the fall, rented an apartment under his new name, different neighborhood, far from where he'd lived before. He watched them, Gerald Whitmore, Richard Kellerman, Marcus Webb, all of them. He learned their routines, where they worked, where they ate lunch, where they went after work. They hadn't changed. They were still successful, still respectable, still smiling. Daniel got a job at a security company. Night shift, monitoring cameras, filing reports. It gave him access to things, building schedules, security codes, patterns. He was patient. He didn't rush. He watched and waited and learned. He found out the lodge met every second Thursday. Same time, same place, same ritual. The same men who'd been there 3 years ago were still members, still attending. He learned that Gerald's son was getting initiated. Next month, a legacy member, just like Daniel had been. Gerald was proud. He talked about it at the country club, at business lunches. Continuing the tradition, he'd say. Daniel listened to these stories secondhand. Through people who didn't know who he really was, who didn't recognize him. The son's name was Philip, 24 years old, fresh out of business school, eager to please his father. Daniel felt something when he heard that. Not quite sympathy, but close. Philip didn't know what was coming, just like Daniel hadn't known. The cycle was continuing. Gerald was going to do to his own son what he'd done to Daniel, what he'd probably done to dozens of others. And Philip would drink, and the taste would never leave him unless someone stopped it. Daniel made a decision. He wasn't just doing this for himself anymore, he was doing it for Philip, for his father, for everyone who'd been broken by these men and their twisted rituals. He was going to end it, but not by destroying them, by making them face what they'd become, by holding up a mirror. He started acquiring what he needed, a building, empty, isolated. He found one on the industrial side of town, an old warehouse. He paid cash for a 6-month lease, no questions asked. He cleaned it out, set it up, made it look like the lodge, candles, stone floor, chairs in a circle, everything the same, everything exact, except for one difference. This time, he was in control. He sent the invitations, handwritten, elegant paper, just like the one he'd received. Your presence is requested for a special ceremony, a matter of brotherhood and honor. He signed them with symbols from Masonic tradition, made them look official, legitimate, something they couldn't ignore. He sent them to all 9 men who'd been in that room 3 years ago, including Gerald. Daniel waited 2 weeks. Then the responses started coming, most of them accepted, curious, intrigued, assuming it was something internal, something secret. They loved secrets. They lived for them. Gerald responded last, confirmed his attendance. Daniel smiled when he read it. They were coming, all of them, walking right into it. He stood in the empty warehouse, his warehouse now. The candles were ready, the cup was ready, everything was ready. In 3 days, they'd be here. And this time, they'd be the ones blindfolded. They'd be the ones holding the cup. They'd be the ones who had to choose, trust or leave, drink or walk away. Daniel wasn't angry anymore. He was calm, focused, ready. He'd spent 3 years preparing for this moment, 3 years becoming someone else, someone stronger, someone who couldn't be broken. The men from the lodge had tried to destroy him. Instead, they'd created something they couldn't control. They'd created their reckoning. They arrived at different times, cautious, curious. Daniel watched them from the shadows. Gerald came first, always the leader. He looked around the warehouse, suspicious but intrigued. Richard arrived next, then Marcus, then the others, all 9 of them, just like that night 3 years ago. Daniel had left the front door unlocked. A single candle lit the entrance, leading them in. They followed it, down the hallway, into the main room, where more candles waited, where the circle of chairs waited, where Daniel waited. They didn't recognize him at first. The beard, the glasses, the weight. He looked different, sounded different. He'd practiced changing his voice, deeper, slower, more controlled. "Gentlemen," Daniel said, "thank you for coming." Gerald stepped forward. "Who are you? Who sent those invitations?" Daniel smiled. "Someone who values tradition, just like you." He gestured to the chairs. "Please, sit." They hesitated, but curiosity won. It always did with men like them. They sat, forming the circle, just like they'd made Daniel stand in the center 3 years ago. Daniel walked around them slowly. "You don't remember me," he said, "but I remember you. Every face, every laugh, every moment." Gerald's eyes narrowed. "What is this?" Daniel stopped. "This is a ceremony, just like the one you performed, the one you've performed on so many others. Tell me, Gerald, how many men have you made drink from that cup?" The room went silent. Recognition flickered across their faces, not of Daniel, but of the situation. They were starting to understand. "Cross," Richard said quietly. Daniel nodded. "Good memory. Though I go by Crossan now, David Crossan, had to change it. You made sure I couldn't use the old one, couldn't get a job, couldn't get a reference, couldn't exist." Gerald stood up. "This is ridiculous. We're leaving." Daniel didn't move. "The doors are locked, magnetic. They'll open in 1 hour. You can try to break them, or you can sit and listen." Gerald looked at the others, then slowly sat back down. Daniel could see the calculation in his eyes. They were trapped, and they knew it. "You humiliated me," Daniel said. "You made me drink something I couldn't identify, something that tasted like death. You recorded it, laughed about it. Then you destroyed my life, systematically, quietly. You took everything." He pulled out a metal cup, the same one. He'd found it in the lodge storage. "Now you're going to understand what that feels like." He placed the cup in Gerald's hands. "Drink." Gerald stared at it. "There's nothing in it." Daniel poured liquid from a bottle, dark, thick. Gerald's face went pale. "What is that?" Daniel didn't answer. "Drink or leave." "Oh, wait, you can't leave, so just drink." Gerald's hands shook. "You're insane." Daniel leaned closer. "No, I'm giving you a choice. The same choice you gave me. Trust or refuse. Drink or live with the knowledge that you refused." Gerald looked at the cup, then at the other men. "It's probably just water, some kind of trick." But his voice wasn't convincing. Daniel smiled. "Maybe, maybe not. Only one way to find out." Gerald stared at the liquid. His hands trembled. He brought the cup closer, then stopped. "I can't." Daniel took the cup back. "Interesting. You couldn't, but you expected me to." He moved to Richard, placed the cup in his hands, poured the same liquid. "Your turn." Richard didn't even pretend to be brave. "No, absolutely not." Daniel nodded. "At least you're honest." He moved to Marcus, then to each of them, one by one, offering the cup one by one. They refused, all 9 of them, every single one. Daniel set the cup down in the center of the circle. "You all refused," he said quietly, "every one of you, because you didn't trust me, because you didn't know what was in it, because you were afraid." He looked at Gerald. "But you expected me to drink. You expected me to trust you, men I barely knew, men who were laughing at me. And when I did, you destroyed my life for leaving afterward." Gerald's face was red. "You can't prove any of this. You can't prove we did anything to you." Daniel pulled out his phone. "Actually, I can. One of you recorded that night, remember? I found the video, anonymous upload, sent to your employers, your families, your church, everyone." Gerald lunged forward. Daniel stepped back. "Already sent, scheduled, unless I cancel it in the next hour, which I might if you do something for me." The room went still. "What do you want?" Gerald asked. Daniel pointed to the cup. I want you to apologize to everyone you've done this to. I want you to end this ritual, this hazing, this cruelty you call tradition. And I want you to leave me alone, erase what you did, give me my life back. Gerald stared at him. And if we refuse? Daniel shrugged. Then everyone sees who you really are. Your choice. Gerald looked at the other men. They were scared now, cornered. Fine, Gerald said. We'll do it. Daniel shook his head. Not good enough. I want it in writing, signed, witnessed. He pulled out documents, pre-written, legal. Sign these, all of you, admitting what you did, agreeing to stop, agreeing to restore my name. They signed, one by one, hands shaking. When the last signature was done, Daniel cancelled the upload. The video disappeared. He unlocked the doors. You're free to go, he said. They stood, rushed toward the exit. Gerald stopped at the door, looked back. What was in the cup? Daniel smiled. Apple juice, food coloring, vinegar. Nothing dangerous, just like you probably gave me, but you didn't know that, just like I didn't know. That's the point. Gerald left without another word. Daniel stood alone in the empty warehouse. He picked up the cup, looked at it, then poured it out. The liquid spread across the stone floor, disappearing into the cracks. He didn't feel victorious. He didn't feel happy, but he felt something. He felt free. The taste was finally gone. The bitterness had left. He'd made them feel what he felt, and that was enough. Daniel walked out into the night. The city lights stretched before him. Somewhere in his pocket were signed confessions, legal documents, his life back in writing. But more than that, he had something they could never take again. His dignity, his power, his choice. They'd tried to break him. Instead, he'd broken their cycle. And that was better than any revenge.